Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? Uh, Happy Friday. Thank you guys so much for hopping on with us on this 2022 Impact Series installment. For those of you who are just joining us, my name is Angela Hollowell. I am a creative producer with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. And if you have been here for week one, which started on Tuesday, thank you guys so much for joining us again. If you're new here and excited to learn more about the Impact Series and what's going on in North Carolina, Virginia, and DC, welcome. The Impact Series is our time at the end of the year to celebrate all the amazing development that's happening along the East Coast Greenway and to share what people can look forward to in the new year 2023. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the speakers of the hour, Andrew Meeker, who is the North Carolina coordinator, and Elliott Caldwell, who is the Virginia and DC coordinator. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Angela.
Absolutely. So these guys are going to get a little bit of a break. We pre-recorded their sessions and developments and thoughts on the work that they've been doing in their regions. And we are going to start with Elliott in the Virginia, DC region and work our way down to North Carolina. So sit back, relax, grab your lunch beverage or snack of your choice, and look forward to hearing about what's going on in Virginia and DC. And we will be back shortly.
I'm Elliott Caldwell. I'm the Virginia and Washington, D.C. coordinator for the East Coast Greenway Alliance. I am based in Washington, D.C., but of course work across the district as well as basically all regions of Virginia that the East Coast Greenway goes through. And I think the three sort of major developments in 2022 that I've been really excited about, the first is historic investment by the Commonwealth of Virginia in terms of trail funding, $93 million in the passed and signed budget. And a big part of that is setting up a new Virginia State Trails Office through the Virginia DOT. But there's also going to be a ton of money going, from that $93 million going into new trail planning, development, as well as construction and such. So I think that number one is incredibly exciting. It's historic investment in trails in Virginia. A lot of that money will go to the East Coast Greenway, and then a lot of that money will also be used in other parts of the state to help build out other networks and local and regional trails. And we're just excited overall that we could be a part of building that trail budget up and getting an office to really support all of our efforts. We work with such great folks on the ground in cities and counties and regions along the ECG route in Virginia. And I know they're all really excited about having a state trails office that not only provides funding, but also provides best practices and sort of will help local communities and develop trails in their region. I'd say two trail segments that we designated this year in Virginia are really exciting would be the Chatham Bridge in Fredericksburg, connecting Stafford County into Fredericksburg, and then the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail, Phase 2 in the city of Suffolk. And those two segments that opened are both wonderful to ride. They're now a part of our route along the East Coast Greenway. If you go to the map, they're both there. The Chatham Bridge was a Virginia DOT project. Really exciting to see them, including a 12-foot wide, I think they call it a multi-use side path on a major water, river crossing in the state. And that's really exciting. And I think we look forward to seeing other bridges done by VDOT along our route with similar multi-use segments to them. And the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline, the Phase 2, mile and a half or so of trail just due east of downtown Suffolk. And it's just a beautiful segment of trail that is just incorporated into our current route seamlessly. And again, will be a part of a broader Southampton Roads Trail in that region, connecting essentially from the Jamestown Ferry across to the cities of Suffolk, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, connecting to Norfolk, connecting to Virginia Beach, and then down towards the Dismal Swamp Canal Trail and heading towards North Carolina on our our complementary route. So I think just a lot of movement in the Hampton Roads region, and the city of Suffolk opening that segment of trail, which is just a beautiful, beautiful trail to be on and sort of ride or walk or roll or run or what have you. And it would be great this time of year if you're down there in the fall. I'm sure it's a really beautiful place to be. So those are the three main sort of, I would say, main developments this year that we've been excited about. I would actually say this time of year is probably my favorite. In DC, for sure, the summers extend a little bit later, sort of past the end of August. So we still get really hot weather through early September. So those last 2 weeks of September and the first 2 weeks of October for me are really great times of year to get out and ride and walk. And it's also, I race cyclocross, and this is the time of year that cyclocross racing starts happening. So I'm oftentimes getting out there and training a little bit more, riding a little bit harder, maybe shorter rides, but maybe more intense rides, and having the getting out there in the ECG and being able to get to some of the parks and other trails segments that are connected to the ECG where I practice cyclocross is sort of a great time of year, just in general, to be outside, particularly in this area. So I think there's a couple exciting developments around DC and in Virginia in 2023. There's a small but very important bike lane project happening in Washington, D.C. that will connect two sections of the Metropolitan Branch Trail around the Brookland area. That will hopefully be happening in 2023, a protected bike lane project that will connect the section south of Franklin Street with the section by the Brookland Metro going north towards Fort Totten. And I believe that that's a project that will be completed in 2023. So while it's only, say, a quarter mile or so of a project, it's a protected bike lane project that will mean a lot, I think, to daily users of the ECG in DC. Another project that we're really, really excited about is the completion of 2 miles of multi-use trail along Mount Vernon Highway in Fairfax County. And this is a section of the ECG south of the Mount Vernon site, south of the Mount Vernon Trail, that connects to Route 1. And so once this it's a local project, it's a Fairfax County project, not a National Park Service project like a lot of the Mount Vernon Trail sections are. Once that 2 miles is completed, it will be essentially the East Coast Greenway will be complete multi-use trail all the way from the Fairfax Prince William County border up into DC when you cross the 14th Street Bridge across into Washington, D.C. itself. So it's a really exciting milestone for, I think, the development and the completion of the East Coast Greenway in Northern Virginia. And there's a ton of other projects that are going to be happening in Northern Virginia to be excited about, including a new crossing with the Potomac that's a little bit further down the road. But I think this project, this 2 mile project on Mount Vernon Highways is quite exciting. And then this is a little bit outside our region, my region, but it's certainly connected in that the two sections of the WB&A Trail are going to be connected. The Prince George's County, Maryland section and the Anne Arundel County, Maryland section are going to be completed by a bridge. That bridge had a groundbreaking, and I'm thinking it's going to be completed at some time next year. And we're just really looking forward to see the development of that bridge and connecting those two trails, which really kind of bridges the DC region, my sort of area, with the Mid-Atlantic region that Daniel Pascal, my colleague in Philadelphia, works on. So I'm really excited about the development or the continued development of that bridge and the completion of that bridge, which I believe is happening in 2023. And thanks so much for listening to me talk a little bit about the DC and Virginia sections of the East Coast Greenway. Really appreciate everyone taking the time, and look forward to hearing from some questions from the audience.
All right, so that was Elliott talking about what's been going on in Virginia and DC. Super stoked for that. If you're in the area, want to visit the area, want to learn more about Virginia and DC, please be sure to post your questions in the comments, and we will be getting to a Q&A section after we dive into the North Carolina region. So next up, we're going to hear from Andrew about what's been going on in North Carolina in 2022.
So my name is Andrew Meeker, and I am the North Carolina coordinator for the East Coast Greenway Alliance. So I am in charge of building out the East Coast Greenway across North Carolina. In this past year, which was my first year on the job, there was much happening in North Carolina, and so it's hard to narrow down to 3 highlights, but I was thinking about 3 different stages of Greenway progression that I would share. So the first is around funding, and something exciting happened in North Carolina is that we were awarded a RAISE grant. RAISE grants are discretionary grants from USDOT that are awarded in a cycle, and they've been called different things in different administrations, such as BUILD and TIGER previously. But so in Elizabeth City, they applied for a RAISE grant to do a planning study for a corridor that would be sort of a complete street, multimodal reimagination of that corridor. It goes by the university, and it goes by several other businesses, and it's used by transit, and it would also include a multi-use or shared use path on which the East Coast Greenway would route. So we applied for that, or Elizabeth City applied for that in, I guess, April, and we were awarded in maybe August the funds, about $2 million, for a planning study to plan that corridor. And so that was really exciting, and it's an example of how the East Coast Greenway can bring federal funds into local areas as an investment. The second highlight is around the kind of planning process and development of new East Coast Greenway Trail. And this year we started and completed a feasibility study in Johnston County for the East Coast Greenway segment between Clayton and Smithfield. And so I think it's about a 16-mile stretch that had many potential routes. It roughly follows the Neuse River. And this is exciting because currently through the Triangle Metro region in Durham, Raleigh, there's about 74 or so miles of East Coast Greenway, the vast majority of which is on trail. And so this study picks off where the kind of southern terminus of that ends in Clayton. And so this would sort of extend it further south about 16 miles. And so with a lot of work with the community and with our really skilled consultants who are leading the study and the leadership in Johnston County, we came up with a final route, and as well as some alternative routes and important connections to other local municipalities that are along the way, such as Selma, going through Wilson Mills. And this will lay the groundwork for us to be able to begin developing the trail and putting money towards it and applying for funding and grants. And so it's exciting to have that vision really laid out. The third highlight in the North Carolina region is a completed segment, the Gorman Street connector in the city of Raleigh. So the Gorman Street is a small but mighty segment. It's really a critical link in 2 important trails in Raleigh, the Rocky Branch Trail and the Reedy Creek Greenway. And so there is this 0.3, 0.4 mile stretch that went over an overpass and on a busy street that had inadequate bicycle pedestrian facilities. And in this short amount of time, or short span of space rather, the project took a long amount of time, but in the short space, they improved 2 busy intersections. They have wide side path on either end. They have a sidewalk next to a cycle track sandwiched with kind of buffer and flex post bollard protected cycle track right in the middle over the overpass. So there's a lot going on in a short span of space. But what it does is a connection that used to be dangerous is now enjoyable to ride. And it is one more sort of filling in a small gap to have a continuous East Coast Greenway across North Carolina and across the East Coast. So looking into the new year, looking towards 2023, there is a lot that we're excited about with the East Coast Greenway in North Carolina. But the big exciting thing that's happening is in North Carolina, 2023 was declared Year of the Trail by the North Carolina General Assembly, the state legislature. And it is the 50th anniversary of the State Trail Act. And in order to sort of celebrate the roles that trails play in North Carolina for our communities, we're having a years-long statewide celebration, and it's being hosted and coordinated by the Great Trail State Coalition, of which the East Coast Greenway is a member. And so we've played a role in building up North Carolina as the Great Trail State, and we're going to be able to showcase that across the entire year of 2023 in North Carolina. And so what that means is that groups like the East Coast Greenway and our trail partners across the state, as well as local municipalities and community groups, anyone can participate in Year of the Trail and hold events on trails, including the East Coast Greenway, as well as natural surface hiking trails and paddle trails and equestrian trails and trails that are accessible, and all sorts of any muscle powered trail is being celebrated. And what we hope from this is that we will build both support among the people of North Carolina, as well as from the leaders, both local elected officials and our state legislature, support for trails and recognition of North Carolina as the Great Trail State, showcasing and highlighting the role that trails play for North Carolina. And through doing so, bring more resources towards development of trail and maintenance of trails in North Carolina. And so we're going to have events on the East Coast Greenway, and if you have ideas for events or want to host an event, we encourage you to reach out to the Great Trail State Coalition or reach out to me with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. And we would love to have your event as a part of the Year of the Trail. Another thing I'm excited about for 2023 in North Carolina is the Complete the Trails Fund. And in the 2021 legislative session, North Carolina designated about $29.5 million towards the development of state trails. And so there's 12 state trails that are under the state park system, and the East Coast Greenway is one of those state trails. And so we have access to some funding that will be really critical, both in continuing to plan and design and develop and build the East Coast Greenway in North Carolina, and hopefully be able to leverage that state funding in order to bring in further federal investment, as well as other access to resources to build out the East Coast Greenway in North Carolina. And so we have this past year developed a 5-year plan for the East Coast Greenway in North Carolina. And we're going to be revamping that next year to make it even more detailed and more visually engaging, so that we know and our partners know across the state, all the communities that we work with along the East Coast Greenway route, what the vision is for getting the East Coast Greenway done in North Carolina, both using the Complete the Trail funds and beyond that, until we're complete. So I use the East Coast Greenway most often while commuting to and from the East Coast Greenway Alliance office and my home. And so the most frequent time I visit is doing that morning and evening commute when I'm going to the office. And I really treasure that time. I mean, I couldn't imagine having to drive every day, and I really want for everyone to have the option or the possibility to ride or walk or whatever on a beautiful Greenway trail instead of being in a car on the road. And so the two times I have really enjoyed most being on the East Coast Greenway during my commute have first been recently. This fall is the first time. I mean, I'm not a year into my position, and so this is the first fall that I've been commuting on the East Coast Greenway on the American Tobacco Trail. And I mean, the colors of the trees and the leaves changing are beautiful. And I also really like riding on all the dried leaves that are on the ground, and the noise it makes to ride over them. It feels fun and festive and cozy and all sorts of good ways to be riding in the fall. But I think my favorite time to commute, or my favorite part of the commute that feels just the most magical, is in the summer when I was biking home in the evening just before sunset, or when it was, a little later. The wood thrush calls were kind of brought this beautiful sonic element to my ride. Wood thrush is my favorite bird call. And if you're not familiar with what a wood thrush sounds like, they can do this thing with their throat where they can make multiple tones at the same time. And they have this call that sounds like this real ethereal, glassy flute. And so they're creating these multiple tones in this really glassy flute-like noise. And I don't see them, but I'm biking, and just in the woods all around me are these calls of the wood thrush, among many other bird calls. But the wood thrush really stands out for me and makes my commute home feel like I am in some magical land. And it brings a smile to my face, and just an appreciation and love for nature and for the East Coast Greenway that allows me to regularly have that experience. So thanks so much for joining and for hearing some updates and exciting upcoming happenings in North Carolina with the East Coast Greenway. I appreciate you spending this time with me, and I look forward to taking your questions.
All righty. Well, we're going to bring up Andrew and Elliott. We hope you have those questions locked and loaded and expressed in our chat. If not, there's definitely still time to do that. We will get to all, if not, as many questions as we possibly can during this time. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start it off with Sylvia Ascarelli from YouTube, and she asks, when do you expect the first shovel in the ground on the Fall Line Trail?
That is a very good question. I know, so part of my position is sort of monitoring what the Commonwealth Transportation Board in Virginia, sort of what they approve, and the Fall Line Trail. It's a project of that Central Virginia Transportation Authority, but they are going through, VDOT for a lot of the sort of permissions. And so I know I believe it was at the last Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting in October. Sort of the design division got full approval for that northern section from the Chickahominy River crossing to then route, I think 657 is the kind of where the southernmost point is. So that portion should be in design, and I'm hoping it's next year. But I don't want to make a promise on the exact date on it. But I will say the last two Commonwealth Transportation Board meetings have had Fall Line Trail items. The one in September was basically the sort of overall authorization for VDOT to enter into an agreement with the Central Virginia Transportation Authority for the entire Fall Line project. And then again, last month, it was that northern section. So we'll start in the north, Chickahominy River crossing to Route 657. And I believe, again, that will be in design now. And hopefully, I'm hoping there's a shovel in the ground next year, but I'm not 100% sure.
All right. Elliott, this next question looks like it's going to you as well. This is from Mark Injuries, also coming from YouTube. Hey, Mark, in the Richmond area, there is a plan for the Fall Line Trail connecting Hanover County through Richmond to Chesterfield and the Appomattox River Trail. Is the East Coast Greenway involved?
Absolutely. So yeah, the Fall Line Trail will be, our major alignment through the Richmond region. So the Virginia sort of our state committee chair is Phil Riggin, who works with Plan RVA, and Plan RVA is obviously very highly involved in the sort of the Fall Line Trail process. We actually also work a lot with the Friends of the Fall Line Trail with Bike Walk RVA and sort of that group of folks. So yeah, the Fall Line Trail is very much a part of our alignment in the Richmond region, and I've been doing site visits in the Richmond area for a while, and also actually I've gone down to the Appomattox River Trail folks and met with FOLAR, the Friends of the Lower Appomattox River, to kind of look at their trail network as well. So yeah, that's very much our alignment. And we look forward to, again, shovels in the ground for the Fall Line, hopefully next year. And, there are sections of the Appomattox River Trail already on the ground, but they are building out their network as well. And we look forward to kind of continuing to kind of, weave our route through their trails as well as they develop more down on the Appomattox River side of things.
So this is just another comment from Sylvia Ascarelli regarding her experience in the DC area. She says, I remember biking from DC South back in 2014. So very exciting to hear that the route south of Mount Vernon Trail is getting better and safer. Did you want to add any comments on that area, Elliott?
No, I mean, I think, for the DC region, Fairfax County, I mean, having that bit completed, I mean, Fairfax County is a massive county. It's, I think, the most populous counties in the DC region. And so having the ECG completed in the county is great. And then we obviously look forward to that kind of connection down towards Prince William County, which is an area that I've visited a couple times, but have definitely a lot more work to do. I will say, related to kind of the Fairfax County or so the DC region in the Fall Line, our friends at Bike Walk RVA and Sports Backers brought a number of folks. I mean, it was upwards of, I think, 40 engineers, planners, elected officials, et cetera, up from Richmond to kind of take some tours of the Metropolitan Branch Trail, the WNOD Trail, et cetera, in the DC region. This was about a month or so ago. Kind of a big field trip, like a day-long field trip. And a lot of it was to expose planners, engineers, advocates, elected officials from the Richmond area to that kind of network in DC to really kind of open their eyes to different possibilities, design possibilities, et cetera. So there's a lot of, I would say I can't take, big credit for it, but I help play a role. There's a lot of back and forth, I think, between sort of that DC network and that Richmond network. Now, we obviously want to connect those two through Fredericksburg. A lot of great things happening there as well in that region. But we really want regions to be able to kind of, take best practices from each other in terms of developing their trail networks. And I think things are on such a great path with the Fall Line because they are looking to integrate what they know kind of about, various trail networks within the East Coast Greenway in the region. So.
Nice. Thank you for that update. The next one is for Andrew. This is a comment from Wayne Clark on YouTube. Hey, Wayne, thanks for joining us. He says, I had the chance to ride the Gorman Street connector in August. Very nice. I wish it could have been completed while I lived in North Carolina. If I remember correctly, Andrew, you had just started when we did the ribbon cutting for the Gorman Street connector. So can you talk a little bit about, what you have come to know that means for residents in and around that area in Raleigh?
Yeah, that was actually my very first day on the job, was the opening for the Gorman Street connector, which got actually completed at the end of 2021, but it sort of opened officially at the beginning of 2022 and was designated as a part of the East Coast Greenway this year as well. And so I actually never got to ride Gorman Street pre those improvements. So I don't have personal experience about how kind of treacherous it was to go between the two trails. But I know from speaking with folks in Raleigh and in the area that is a very critical link to just making sure that connection feels safe and comfortable, and you're not kind of competing with cars as you go over the overpass.
Nice. So we have the next one is a question from John Corin asking about the WBNA Trail linking Anne Arundel and Prince George's County in Maryland. So for Elliott, he does have some experience with this because DC people are super excited about the WBNA Trail. But we did just want to say, if you have the time in your calendar on Tuesday of next week, we'll be joined by Daniel Pascal, who is our Mid-Atlantic Regional Manager, and he will be talking a little bit more in depth about that and the developments in Maryland as well. So please stay tuned for that and join us if you can on Tuesday, same time, starting at noon, with Daniel Pascal talking a little bit about Maryland and other states within the Mid-Atlantic region. Going forth, I think we answered Mark's question. Another one from Wayne Clark. He's saying, I'd like to get a little more detail about the Met Branch Trail through Brookland. What's the plan for 8th Street? Is that a question for you, Elliott?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that would be that is for me. That is the sort of the quarter mile, whatever you want to say, quarter to half mile section connecting two bits of Met Branch Trail. So the Met Branch Trail north of Brookland towards Fort Totten is not currently on our route. We will have to kind of wait until the section from Fort Totten connecting to the Anacostia River Trail is connected to really make that an entire connection. But the section south of Monroe Street, which is where the Brookland Metro is, towards the entrance of the Met Branch Trail, is what we're talking about. And it's been a contentious project, I guess you could say, locally. And so but we are anticipating and, knock on wood, hoping that we will see completion of that project in 2023 with a two-way cycle track and then sidewalks that are existing, but some improved intersection sort of safety aspects of that project. There has been, just to be very frank, there has been pushback from some of the local business owners, a few of them, about the street to basically create the two-way cycle track and still have parking. It has to be made a one-way street for a few blocks, and I think there is some pushback on that from a couple of the local business owners. And so I think that it was a design. The design was presented. There was an election, so we have a new city council member for the region, for the district of the Ward 5, who's very supportive of the protected bike lane project. So I feel like eventually we will have a protected bike lane on that street. What it looks like for the parking and the traffic side of things, I'm not 100% sure. There is plentiful parking on the street. There's a parking lot right across, a subterranean parking lot right across from many of the businesses, but there's still that push for on-street parking that I think has made it a challenge, right? Curb to curb, there's only so much room. But I think a two-way cycle track is going to be there no matter what, as far as I'm concerned. So.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Andrew, there is some interest in learning just a little bit more about various segments in North Carolina. We often talk about, the triangle, and you did mention the broader scope of the Year of the Trail launch. So that's not just, the parts that maybe people go on our spine route, but maybe also our complementary route trails, as we are, as you stated, a designated state trail in North Carolina. So could you mention just a little bit more about maybe some other various trails around North Carolina that people might be interested in learning more about and exploring in 2023?
Yeah. Well, with regards to the East Coast Greenway, some of the new progress that is happening in North Carolina, there's other parts of the Triangle region, including in Granville County. We are just concluding a feasibility study between Butner and Oxford. And so this is just north of Durham, and kind of heading towards the Virginia state line. And so similar to in the recorded video, I mentioned going south from Clayton to Smithfield, that sort of extends the triangle route south. This would extend it north. And then there would just be a kind of small gap in Durham to complete, part of which will be filled in by the Durham Rail Trail, which is under design right now. And likewise, we'll hopefully be breaking ground in 2023, although like Elliott, I am hesitant to make any promises, but there's been a lot of really exciting progress on that, and momentum and community support for the Durham Rail Trail. And then we are also in the process of doing a feasibility study on NC 210, which is on the complementary route just north of Wilmington, near Topsail and Surf City. And kind of similar to the other feasibility studies I mentioned, this would sort of extend out from Wilmington, where there is quite a bit of trail on the ground, and extend that network out. And so it is just an example of how the East Coast Greenway, like cities are able to kind of catalyze trail, and it spreads out from there in a really exciting way. And so we are identifying the kind of preferred alignment right now in that Surf City Topsail area. And then, yeah, I encourage folks to visit all the other great trails we have across the state during Year of the Trail. When we recorded the video, it was before the Year of the Trail officially kicked off. But yesterday on December 1st, we had our kickoff event as a part of the Carolina Thread Trail Forum. And we will have our first official Year of the Trail events on January 1st of 2023 for first day outdoors. So people go out on trails across the state.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Andrew. And thank everyone so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed all the questions and comments, and really informative pieces of information about what's going on in North Carolina, Virginia, and DC. To support the work of growing the Greenway from Maine to Florida, we would really appreciate it if you consider donating to the East Coast Greenway Alliance. Every dollar goes towards making trails and greenways a reality for all people of ages and abilities. And we just appreciate everybody who's donated so far, everybody who took the time to donate and share on Giving Tuesday. But as you know, you can give it any day of the year, and every donation is just as important. So thank you guys for that. And of course, if you've already donated and you want another way to support the Greenway, and you would love to buy some merch, we would love to see you rocking our merch on social media. So we have tees, we have hats, we have beanies, we have all the things. Please be sure to check out our merch shop, get swagged out in East Coast Greenway swag, and we cannot wait to see you again next week. I do want to make a correction. Next week is not Tuesday, it is Wednesday at noon, and we will be joined by Daniel Pascal, who is our Mid-Atlantic Regional Manager, and Bruce Donald, who you've met before, but who will be joining again to accompany Daniel in talking about developments in the New York and New Jersey region. So again, thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.